There is a knock at the door. When the family opens it, the step is empty, no traveler, no shadow, no breath fogging the winter air. And yet a voice, low and unhurried, reads a single name into the house. It is not a name they were expecting. It belongs to someone lying in the back room, someone who was not supposed to leave tonight. Across East Asia, for 1,000 years, this is how death was imagined to arrive, not as a void, not as an accident, but as a caller with a list. And here is the strange part. Almost no one pictured death as random. Everyone pictured a clerk. Why? The caller has 3 names. In Korea he is the Gyeosung Saja, the messenger from the world beyond, arriving in the black robes and wide-brimmed hat of a government official. In China he is not one figure but 2, the Heibai Wachang, the black and white impermanence, a pale escort and a dark one walking side by side. In Japan he is the Shinigami, the death spirit. 3 cultures, 3 funerals, 1 recurring shape, a robed figure who comes to fetch you when your time is entered in some distant book. It is tempting to assume this is a single old legend that walked from village to village, changing costume as it crossed each border. Tempting. But, as we will see, wrong.
Because a shared name is not a shared meaning. When 3 peoples borrow the same silhouette, they do not borrow the same fear. Follow the death messenger across these 3 lands and he refuses to stay the same creature. In one place he is a magistrate. In another, a weary employee. In a third, he is barely older than the newspapers. To understand why almost every village chose a bureaucrat over a void, we have to let each culture speak in its own hand and watch the single legend we assumed was traveling quietly come apart. Start where the paperwork of death was most elaborate. Start in the Chinese underworld.
The Chinese afterlife, Diyu, was not a pit. It was an administration, traditionally 10 courts, each with its own judge, its own registers, its own department of punishment and reward. Escorting the newly dead into this machinery are the Heibai Wachang, the black and white impermanents. Folklorists note they began, in legend, as human bailiffs, and kept the job after death. The white one, Xie Bayan, offers mercy, be at peace, all who atone. The black one, Fan Wujio, carries judgment, for the wicked, no escape. They are not devils. They are process. Death here is less an ending than an audit, and the reaper is the clerk who walks you to the front desk. Korea inherited the same courtroom cosmos and dressed its messenger for the Joseon dynasty. The Gyeosung Saja arrives not as a skeleton but as a civil servant, black robes, the wide gat of an official, a register in one hand and a brush to check your name against it. He serves King Yomra, ruler of the underworld, and he is, unmistakably, just doing his job. The records show families would set out sajat bap, 3 small bowls of rice at the gate, a courtesy to the clerks who had come to collect. Some stories tell of bribes to buy a few more years, and of the messenger who occasionally drags off the wrong person entirely. Death as an office with a filing error.
By now the theory looks solid: 1 ancient reaper, 3 national uniforms. Then you reach Japan, and the theory collapses. The Shinigami feels timeless, but folklorists point out the word barely exists in classical Japanese literature. It surfaces only around the Edo period, in puppet plays and popular stories about death and double suicide. It was assembled late, from borrowed parts: the Buddhist tempter Mara, the Chinese underworld enforcers Oxhead and Horseface, and, as Japan met the West, the hooded Grim Reaper himself. The Shinigami is not the ancestor of this legend. It is the youngest child, stitched together from everyone else's dead. So much for one legend traveling. What, then, actually traveled?
Look closer and the same bones surface everywhere. A supreme judge sits at the center, Yang Luo in China, Yomra in Korea, Enma in Japan, the same title carried across 3 tongues. Beneath him, ledgers. The old texts describe books of life in which each person's death is already dated, so the messenger is not choosing you, he is reading a line written long ago. And at the very end of the Chinese underworld waits Meng Po, in the 10th court, beside the bridge of forgetting, ladling a broth of oblivion so each soul crosses into its next life remembering nothing. Judge, ledger, escort, and the mercy of forgetting. Not one legend, then. 1. Architecture.
And architecture is built by the grieving. Consider what these customs actually did for the living. In Japan, 6 coins, the rokumonsen, were placed with the body to pay the ferryman across the Sanzu, the river of 3 crossings, so no loved one would reach the far bank unable to afford the passage. In Korea, the bowls of rice at the door. In China, offerings burned for the officials below. These were not really transactions with the dead. They were things a family could do with its hands on the worst of nights, a way to keep loving someone after love had run out of anywhere to go. The reaper gave grief a task.
So here is the more honest picture. Perhaps nothing so complete as a myth ever crossed these borders. Perhaps what traveled was only a silhouette, the barest sketch of a robed escort holding a name list at a threshold. And each culture, meeting that outline, filled it with its own machinery of death, China with its 10 courts, Korea with its Confucian magistrates, Japan with its late, borrowed spirit. The costume changed at every border because the costume was the only thing ever shared. Underneath, each people was answering a private question in its own handwriting, the same question that opened this record. Why a clerk? Why not a void? Because a void cannot be reasoned with, and a clerk can. This is the reveal the record has been walking toward. The death messenger was never mainly a monster. He is a memory device. Turn death into an office and the unbearable becomes procedure, a name list, so it is not random, a judge, so it is not meaningless, an escort, so no one crosses alone. We did not invent the reaper to frighten the dying. We invented him so the living would have somewhere to send their grief, a face to plead with, a clerk to blame, an order laid gently over the chaos. He is a mirror we hold up to loss, and the reflection wears a uniform.
And we are still holding it up. Look at how we picture death now, the hooded figure in films, the Shinigami with his notebook in a story that sold across the world, the reaper you can bargain with in a video game. The costume keeps updating, the instinct does not. We still want death to knock rather than simply happen. We still want a list with logic to it, a threshold with someone standing at it, a passage we can, somehow, prepare for. Folklorists note the office of death outlived the empires that built it, because the need it answers has not aged a single day. So the next time a story sends a robed stranger to a door, remember what he is really carrying. Not a scythe. A ledger and the whole weight of everyone who ever needed death to make sense. That closes the record of the traveler ferried across the river he was never meant to cross. But some souls, the old tales insist, refuse the ferry. Next, we open the account of the woman in white who returns from the far bank not to haunt strangers, but to finish a sentence someone living cut short. Until then, the lantern stays lit.